I am Neil.
I'm Veronica. We fell in love when we were 16, and here we are talking about what life is all about for us. Thank you for joining us.
This is a Life Is podcast with Neil and Veronica.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for tuning in again. It's Veronica here with Life Is with Neil and Veronica. So thank you for tuning in. And it's different because I'm introing today's episode because I really want the focus to be on Neil in a sense and what he has to say about this topic. But today we're going to talk about life is pouring into yourself. It's something that is definitely near and dear to my heart, a topic that is very important to me. And it's become even more important to me because of all the amazing things that Neil has said along the way that has helped me in my own self development as well. But you are worth it. And I think that's a message that we want you to hear loud and clear, and all the different ways that you can pour into yourself. And it's so important because we are so used to, whether you're a mom, whether you're an amazing friend, whether you are a caregiver, whether you are a partner, whatever roles that you play in your life, we are so used to serving everyone else around us and prioritizing everyone else around us that often we don't take care of ourselves like we should. And I feel like Neil has a lot of wisdom around this. So I am going to turn it over to you, Neil.
Oh, for that kind introduction as far as wisdom. I feel that I've just gained a lot of knowledge that really help propel us to share it via a podcast or however else we like to share it with those who are close to us. And of course, it is a quarter of the way today through 2023. And we started off this whole podcast on December 20th of last year, talking about my health, myself, and my wealth, which was the whole goal for me, or the three buckets for me this year. So pouring into yourself is really the main focus when I talk about myself, right? Focusing on myself and what I need to do. And we've touched on a few subjects throughout the first few episodes, whether it's being kind to yourself, whether it's prioritizing what matters. It is all based on the whole concept of pouring into yourself and putting yourself first, however you want to phrase it. And before the podcast began, I had shared this viewpoint with Veronica, and I said, if I asked you, what would be the number one thing that you should invest in? And I'll ask the same to everybody here. Because when you think of what should I invest in, what should be my number one investment, people think financial, or at least I did. I think Veronica did too. Because the word investment is very synonymous with money and savings and our future. When in fact, the number one thing that we should invest in is ourselves. You should invest now. Everything before anything else, number one on your list of investments should be you. And there can be many different ways that you can do this. And, if listening to this podcast is one of them, thank you very much. I hope that it brings you, some thoughtful insights twice a week or however often you listen, because this is why we want to share it, because it not only helps us individually, helps us as a marriage, helps us as parents, but hopefully it can help others too. So investing in yourself, what and why is it? Well, first of all, when you invest in yourself, whether it's your health or whether it's, your mental thought process, whatever it is that you would like to work on yourself, there's so many different facets in this. But when you focus on that, no matter what happens, a pandemic, a job loss, a loss of a close loved one, perhaps, we all know those things are going to happen along the way. I'm sure that they've happened before. And, part of the journey that is this amazing thing called life is it's going to happen again. So when you invest in yourself and things like that happen and it knocks you down or it takes you off the path that you're on, when you've already invested in yourself, like your knowledge, things like your health, things like your mindset or, your friend group that you've now changed perhaps, or what you're ingesting every day when it comes to either food or, the news that is positive. When you've done that investment, you can regroup, you can get back to the level that you were at so much faster and so much quicker, because you cannot take away the internal and the stuff that you've done in the past like you can, let's say, a job or your finances, whatever it is that this event has taken away. What you've done to this point and what you continue to do this point, this day forward, will always be there and will help you rebound quicker. And I think about, for me, the journey I've had on my career and having setbacks all along the way, whether it's a job loss, whether it's, having an unsupportive manager who makes you feel a certain way, whether it's being recruited out of a job and blame being placed on you for certain things that were out of your control. And what I wanted to get into when we talked about this is, when you're on this journey and things happen to you, I've learned over these events that you need to stop shooting on yourself. And I know that might sound funny, but
You want to spell that out?
Yeah.
You want to spell that out?
Yeah. SHOULD, shoulding. Okay. So we have to, whether it's ourselves or maybe it's even like the support group around you that you're talking to, removing that mindset or that word, as you've heard many times before, words matter. When you stop shooting on yourself, it really is a way to pour into yourself, be kinder to yourself. And I have many examples of that along the way, where when things happened around me, and it didn't happen, I thought it happened to me, right? It didn't, I thought that it was happening to me, but it was things that were out of my control that were happening around me and in my life. And my thought process was always, I should have done this to prevent that, or I should have done this and this wouldn't have happened. I should have. And it really starts to wear you down. It really starts to take away from what you've already put in. And it sets you back even further by saying that word, because in most cases, it's nothing that you did do that could have prevented what happened, whether it's a job loss. In my case, I can think of, a lot of examples in that case, that when it happened, I said to myself, well, I should have done this and I wouldn't be in this position, basically. But I do know now from this journey that I've been on and continue to be on, that even when those things happen, and it may happen again, and when it happens, because I've invested in myself, because I've invested in where I'm at mentally, physically, financially, whatever it may be, I know that I don't need to say those words, and that I can gain back whatever I may have lost and continue forward being stronger than I was before, because of whatever has happened. So, Veronica, I know that you had a mid-sentence thought there. So I'd love to hear what your thoughts are, because you've seen it from the outside when it comes to the events that have happened around us. So yeah, I would love to hear from you.
Yeah, I mean, watching you and your journey has been extremely inspirational. You have come such a far way in that sense, in terms of the growth. And I really see you investing in yourself and, your growth and your development and all the things that you do for you. And that's been a really beautiful thing to watch. So for those of you that are tuning in that might not know, Neil and I have been together since we were 16. And, we've grown through a lot of different things together, and we've gone through a lot of life together and a lot of different milestones and stages. And Like we got together when we were teenagers, right? And that's like a whole other thing as well. But in hearing you talk about your journey and even in sharing in that now, it is very apparent that you've moved past that and you've grown from that. And I think watching you do that has been absolutely incredible. And it really does speak to, I guess, also like in terms of how you develop for yourself, that no matter what happens, no matter what like tangible like things, like actual things that people can or events can take away from you, you will always have yourself to land on in a sense, right? And that's not saying that events are not hard. Like when we went through those times in our life. So, Neil openly said job loss. It wasn't one, right? Like there was multiple times where there's been job loss and that's out of your control. That's out of our control. Creates, a lot of chaos and, it's like adversity that we kind of go through and you have to course correct and you have to not even course correct, I want to say, but you just, it's these almost like forks in the road where you're like, okay, now what? What are we going to do? What are the next steps? And when there's, I think, these events that happen, when there is adversity, when things are not within your control, I think and when you should on yourself, it's almost like you're trying to claim some aspect of control of that situation that happened to you where you think like, okay, well, what should I have done to make that event better so that I don't have to sit in that adversity right now or, whatever that may be. So I'm always a fan and training myself in my mindset. Like I've learned now the value of feeling the feels, right? Like not brushing those under the carpet or trying to dismiss them because I know what that can feel like. And that happened to us when you did lose your one job, right? We were very much like, oh, it's not like a thing. Or even when our youngest was going through her health issues, we were like, oh, you know, someone else has it out there worse, or someone else lost their job longer than me, or, whatever that might be. And so it's been really amazing to see you and your journey and your growth. And I love that we have this platform in a sense to kind of share about our journey and what we do to help ourselves in hoping that it resonates with others as well, because it's so easy and it's almost like a reaction, like a knee jerk reaction to go into the should and not even sometimes about like ourselves. Sometimes it's about placing that should on others. And I think that that's also trying to like, claim that feeling of like control over certain things or, trying to improve an outcome of something. And now I've really seen you grow in that and all of your messages that you have to say with all of that too, and the time that you put in because and I think like you can probably expand on this too, but any time that you put into yourself, improving yourself, growing yourself is never effort lost. Like
100%.
I really don't think that there's an example ever of pouring into yourself, pouring into myself. For those of you listening, right, like pouring into yourself, like really think about that you'll ever regret.
And yeah, 100%. And it doesn't even have to be like a financial thing, right? It can be as simple as dedicating some time for you to do anything that is going to improve your thought process, right? Whether it's reading, writing, journaling, meditation, there's some exercise, right? Yoga, whatever it is. It doesn't necessarily have to be investing yourself financially in it, right? Like you don't have to take a course necessarily. And I know that you've shared there's a lot of free courses out there as well, right? So there's always ways to do it that are not having financial. Obviously, if you put financial money into it, you may be able to get more out of it down the line, but that's up to each individual's journey. But 100%, you will never have a bad investment when it comes to investing in yourself, like you would a financial investment in the other aspect. And when we're talking about using the word should, and you talked about gaining control. It's 100% true that having that word in your vocabulary is you trying to control what you did in the past. So it having that word is you living in the past, trying to fix what you did in the past, when your energy can be better spent in acknowledging how you're feeling because of what happened, and then realizing what you can do next time. So, right, it's almost like you can't 100% say that you should replace should with next time, but in the general sense, instead of saying should have done this, the better way to approach it would be, okay, next time when something happens similar to this, here's how I want to do it. Here's how I want to move past it. Here's what I can do next time to gain control over myself in those situations. So that's what I would also say has happened, is knowing that I'm not living in the past and I'm looking towards being present in dealing with the feelings of it, and then knowing what I can do next time. So that's where I would go with that.
And I don't even think it's always about next time. It's not necessarily pouring your energy into like, like what if this happens again? Because I think, for me, if I get into that process, I would be focusing a lot of energy on like honestly a lot of ridiculous things. And I'll put that on me now, is that like for me, like I do realize I can spend some time in what I would call like a ridiculous realm of like where I don't need to be pouring my energy into. And I love how you are constantly reminding me of like, okay, yeah, like, feel what you're feeling, it's happening. And then where are you right now, and what can you do in terms of where you're at? And I really saw you like, in terms of pouring into yourself. And for you, like you can speak to this and I can speak to like what works for me. So for example, like my self-development, honestly, in a sense, I love quotes. There's something about reading a quote where I'm like, yes, I almost feel like heard or seen or something. Like I read a quote and I'm like, oh my goodness, someone understands like what I'm feeling. And that really resonates with me. And it starts to make me feel like, changing my mindset and that sort of thing, and recognizing what serves me, what doesn't, who, is great energy for me, how that makes me feel. And so it can be things, it can be people, it can be, I am not a reader. I think too many thoughts at the same time. And when I'm trying to read a book, like well intentioned, so unless you like segregate me on some sort of spa on a ship, which like maybe we might have experienced, I was able to read a book. So, I'm never going to turn down that opportunity to read a book. But at home, it's just not my jam. It's not my thing. I know that as much as I try, I'm not going to sit and read a book. It's just not something that serves me at home in my life with that. And so it's not something that I do. But you know what? Neil reads a lot of books. He learns a lot of great things. And when Neil and I have these conversations, it's really fulfilling for me. And it does really pour into me and helps develop me. And I think even as role models, like again, like whatever role that you have in someone's life, whether you are a parent or a friend or any of that, whether, we talked about this before, even about like setting boundaries. Like for me, that is pouring into myself in a sense of learning where my boundaries are. They're there for me, they're not there for anyone else. And for me to even feel okay with that, like for me to even start feeling okay with saying no and, not associating that with when I say no, I'm going to disappoint somebody. So I've shifted my mindset into when I say no, I'm actually pouring into myself because I'm learning more about how I feel about certain situations, how I feel about certain things or certain events or, certain crowds, and learning my boundaries, and that there's nothing wrong with my boundaries. And in fact, I feel better and, I feel like I can grow more as a person when I do respect my own boundaries.
Yeah. And I'm just thinking about, our journeys separate and together, and how when you make these changes, right, whether it is, investing your time in reading, investing your time in exercising, and you've changed something about you, or you've changed something about where you spend your time, right? So again, pouring into yourself. When you make change, Veronica said this, I'm sure I've said this, change is hard. Change is hard for you, change is hard for those around you. And when you make that change, just know that if the people that are part of your circle are coming from a place of like jealousy or envy, or a place of why are you doing this now, like you never used to be this way, again, you should continue to be that way, is probably what they're trying to say. It's all, and we've learned this, when people come from that mindset, it's all from them seeing you be at a place where they want to be. So don't let that deter you from continuing to pour into yourself, and just know that they will either continue to be that way because they're not in the right space to make that change for themselves, or you will inspire them to make that change. And for those who stay behind, who aren't ready to make that change, that's okay for them, but maybe you need to invest less of your time in them until they're ready, because that won't be pouring into what you want to do, because they're not seeing what you've done. So I know we've had a handful of that happen, whether it's friend groups, whether it's other relationships that sees our relationship and what we're doing, whether it's, you know, the parenting realm, whatever it is, we've had people who see what we're doing individually, relationship wise, parent wise, and questions come up, viewpoints come up, and thankfully we have each other to lean on in a lot of these, because we can say to each other, you know, okay, I see you're feeling that way, you know, okay, but don't let us deter our decision. Don't let us deter our path that we're on, because again, I feel like this always comes up, and it feels like the most staple concept that we keep having. The best decision that you make is the one that you make for you. And if that's pouring into yourself because, you know, you're going to the gym 7 times a week and you can't hang out with your friends who want to go out for dinner, or if it's, you know, you want to invest yourself time-wise for, you know, reading, writing, whatever it is, and you know, your partner or your friends don't agree with it, that's okay for them, but don't let it deter you from pouring into yourself and investing in you.
I wanted to say on that too is when you pour into yourself, it's not at the convenience of other people. And I feel like I just want that to sit in there for a bit, or settle in, or whatever. I never know like the right terminology to say. But and it's a journey. It's not easy, and it's not saying, you know, pour into yourself is like putting on a face mask and sitting in a bath or whatever that might be. We're like, when we're sharing what we do to pour into ourselves and how that's meaningful for us, and you know what feels great in terms of what's helping us grow as individuals, as a couple, it's a journey. Life is a journey. We're probably going to talk about that at some point. I don't know if we've done that yet, but it's a journey, and like it's taking little steps. It's choosing those things, you know, and it's figuring out what serves you and what doesn't. And one of the emotions I find that often comes up for me, less now, which I'm feeling like so proud of, is guilt. And it was such a weird thing. Like, you know, we're trying to become better individuals. And there was just something associated with that that made me often feel like guilty, or, you know, when you're pouring into yourself, no one else's cup is associated with that, in a sense, if you think of that visual. You can choose to spend energy to pour into others. Like, there is a time and a place and, you know, situations for that. And it's not that when you're pouring into yourself, you cannot also simultaneously pour into others. You can sometimes also do both. There are situations, I think, where that's also relevant. But if you focus on your glass, your cup, your bowl, whatever vessel it is that you want to visualize in terms of pouring into yourself, that's yours. And that's your vessel. And nobody has the right to stick their spoon in it or whatever it is. Right? Like I'm all about visuals. You'll notice when we start talking about things, like in order for me to kind of grasp like these concepts for myself or to move forward in my thinking, I am really like a visual person. And so like, block those spoons or whatever. Like, but it's just such an important thing. And it's been, sometimes I thought that pouring into others was going to pour into myself. Sometimes it does, but when you focus too much on pouring into everyone else, there's nothing left for you.
Yeah. I think the difference that I've learned for me is when you're trying to, and where you're going to get the difference that you just talked about, Veronica, is when you pour into others, you can find that it does help you or that it doesn't. So I feel like the distinction is when you're pouring into somebody else that serves your own purpose or meaning, belonging, right? When that is how you're doing the pouring out to other people, that's when you start to get things back to you. But when you're pouring into others because it's for them, that's where you're not going to get anything in return. It's going to drain you. It's going to deplete your investment in yourself where you're not even able to. So when you're serving, your purpose and it's serving towards others, whether, for me anyways, sharing this information in this platform on a podcast, and I'm hoping that it serves well for each individual person on a certain episode or a certain moment, that it gives me energy to do that. It gives me energy to be able to take what I've learned and to help other people maybe find a message that they haven't heard yet, or maybe haven't heard in a while. And we've talked about this is, sometimes you have to hear things multiple times before you start to actually believe it or for it to sink in. And maybe this is that one time that you've heard it repeatedly again and again, and it just clicks, whatever it is for each individual person. Because I know that that's true for me, is I've heard things multiple times, or we've talked about things multiple things that is food or health related as well. So yeah, I really feel that you can pour into other people, but you need to make sure it mirrors what your purpose and hope and belonging it is for you.
And even when you pour into others, I feel like they have to be in a realm of receiving sometimes too. And again, like I was kind of giggling a little bit when you were talking about that, because here I am with visuals and I was picturing a glass with like saran wrap over top that you can't see, and you're trying to pour into them and it's not even filling them up, right? Like sometimes we make assumptions that we are pouring into others too, and it's maybe not like the right space or right time for them. And ultimately, you need to be full to a certain extent before you can pour into others too. And I think it's just being a great role model. Like, focus on yourself, but it's so important that, for us as parents, that our kids see us pouring into ourselves and that we prioritize ourselves too. And that, things that are important to us are what they are, and that we don't have to feel bad or guilty or that we're taking away by doing any of that. And, pouring into yourself too is also like, I feel like celebrating your wins and cheering for yourself. And, it is finding people in your corner. Absolutely. And so when we talk about pouring into yourself, like, I know we focused a lot on a few things, but is there anything else that really like stands out to you that has been a really big part of your journey? Because I know that, and it is a journey, and I think it's an endless journey, right? Like there is no ceiling to self-development and pouring into yourself. And, it's it's a bottomless cup. I just saw an Instagram ad for a bottomless mimosa the other day that I was sharing with Neil. We were like, wow, that looks amazing. But it is this bottomless cup of pouring into yourself.
Yeah, I think that the only thing that I've realized in maybe the last few months of this journey that, I think started, I don't know, maybe 2 or 3 years ago now. I don't have a specific, but like when I really started invested time, whether it's reading or listening or anything else that I've done, um, I've really come to the realization over the last little bit that there are going to be times where the investment that you put in is more, like you are going to have more available time to do it. And there's going to be some days or weeks where you don't have any time available to it. Like when we were on our vacation, I brought books. I mean, I downloaded things to listen to, but by the end of the day, like I really didn't have time or a lot of energy to do it. And it's having that space and mindset to be able to say, like, that's okay. So those situations, there's going to be times where you have time, you don't have time, and being kind to yourself, like we've talked about in a separate podcast, in that situation, to know that it's okay for you to have a low time where you're not putting as much or any time into it, has been another step in my journey, because I picked it back up again when I had the time and space afterwards. And I knew that it would all even out in the end in the investment time, and that the investment I was putting into enjoying where we were at was much more important at that time than, let's say, well, I have to make sure that I read, or I really want to listen. Like, it just wasn't the time for it. And so that's one thing over the last little bit that I've learned to let go or add on to my journey. So that's what I would leave that off with, is when you've made the thought process to invest in yourself, you're going to have more times, some weeks or some days than others. And that's okay, because you will continue to grow each day as long as it's priority for you to invest in yourself.
I think that's a great example of just how it can shift, and it can shift by day, it can shift by week. And, maybe something that was part of your self development, like if you are halfway through a book and you're kind of done with that, nobody says you have to finish it. You probably got lots from half a book and that can shift. And maybe, you're going to listen to your podcast or whatever it might be. And, part of the self-development that week is maybe even just reflecting on where we were and the time. And I think just being more in tune with what is serving you. And we talk about that a lot, whether it's things, you know, whether it's food, whether it's your circle, whatever it is, it's just really being in tune. And like that can shift by day, by hour, by week, by month. So I think that that's a really great example of how pouring into yourself can look different every day. And the amount of time or the amount of effort can shift as well. And it doesn't mean that it's ever less than or not as important or whatever that is, because it's about also consistency, and it's about continuing to move forward, continuing to pour into yourself, and just continuing on that journey and that pathway.
Agreed, 100%. And I'm really thankful that we had this opportunity that you gave me to speak a lot about this, because I, reflecting on where I was shooting on myself so much, I really, like you said, began to pour into myself and focus 100% on that one bucket that I started out this year with. And I'm very happy with where I'm at so far, quarter of the way through this year. And I'm looking forward to, continue to update people and you and on where I'm at with a lot of different things as we move along this way in this journey, sharing our stories, our thoughts, and our journey in this platform, however you listen or watch us. So thank you, everybody, as always, for joining us, listening to us, watching us, and sharing with those who are around you. We really, truly appreciate it. And we cannot understate it enough how grateful we are. But wouldn't be one last thought with Veronica if it wasn't, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say life is more beautiful with all of you. That's what I want to end it off with.
Absolutely. Have a great day, everybody.